Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and I'm joined by our chief Newcastle United writer who's out in Australia covering Newcastle on their tour. They've just been playing at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. They drew 1-1 with Spurs in normal time and then beat them 5-4 on penalties. The penalty takers were rather on the young side. We had Joe White, Ben Parkinson, and Amadou Diallo converting with ease. Then we had Grant Kiol and Harrison Ashby getting the other two. Mark Gillespie came off the bench and he saved one of the Spurs penalty, as we say, 5-4 on pens. So Newcastle pick up the win. Lee, you are the only UK journalist over there, I think, covering this tour, which is quite something. So this is kind of an exclusive podcast coming to you guys. How has the trip been so far before we get into the game?
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute whirlwind when we look back on the Brentford game. It was a mad dash across London to catch the flight. We got there in time. It was fine. The flight was okay. I was expecting it to be a bit more dramatic in terms of the changeover, but everything went like clockwork, really. There was a little delay flying out of China to come into Melbourne, but overall it was spot on. It was a good journey and it went well.
Fantastic here. And before the game, you've been catching up with Newcastle United fans who are over in Australia. Some have travelled across Australia to get to Melbourne, others living in Melbourne and just making the most of getting to see their team in person. What's the atmosphere been like around the fan base?
You know what? It's been unbelievable, I have to be honest. I went round all three fan zones before the game and it was absolutely jumping. I think we captured some of the scenes which we've now posted onto our socials. It was like Newcastle on a match day, in the middle of December. It was absolutely jumping, loads of chanting. The fans knew all the songs here, and a lot of them are from Newcastle originally, and they've come out here to work, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And it was great to speak to people who, passed on good messages about Chronicle Live and the Everything is Black and White podcast. And they said they listen all the time. And it's great to know that people appreciate that, down under.
It certainly is. And I think for a lot of these fans, Lee, it'll be quite an emotional moment when to see their team in the flesh, because usually they're getting up at God knows what hour to see Newcastle play on TV, but they are having the opportunity to see them in person, which must mean the world to them.
Yeah, I was speaking to some people and they pretty much had tears in their eyes. And don't forget, there's a lot of young supporters as well. We're experiencing seeing their team for the first time. A lot of families, sons and daughters seeing the game with their dads for the first time. It was quite emotional, if I'm being totally honest. And we're all probably a bit tired and jet lagged as well, so that's probably playing a part. But it was quite emotional to see that. And for all the talk of it being, a meaningless friendly, you tell that 80,000 people there tonight. They loved the atmosphere. We had the blading races before the game. We had a local hero, fireworks. It was such a big occasion, and I think the Australian hospitality has been just unbelievable. Such a friendly country, and everyone seems to have had a great time here.
Now, the game itself, as we said, 1-1 in normal time, 5-4 on penalties to Newcastle. Watching it back here in the UK, Lee, it definitely had the feeling of what it was, a kind of a meaningless game. Would you agree with that? Some of what you saw?
Well, it's always different when you're looking at it live. I think there was some aspects of it where a little bit flat. Some performances were a little bit flat, but I don't think anyone can be surprised by that, given the stage of the season we're in. But I thought some players put in an absolute shift, even for being a friendly. Bruno Guimaraes just seems to just have this unlimited energy, and obviously he had a part in the crucial equaliser. And then, it was down to, some less familiar names to step up and deliver from the spot. And what a great moment for Mark Gillespie as well. He travels all around the country in Europe with Newcastle, doesn't get much of the limelight. For him to have that in front of 80,000 people, you saw Dan Burn at the end running up to him. They wanted to really make that a big moment for him because he can be just as important behind the scenes as someone who plays every week. That's the mentality Eddie Howe has got in the squad now. And you just feel it when you're talking to the players, when you're talking to the manager, and there's a lot of positive energy coming from that dressing room.
Yeah, Mark Gillespie came on, captain's armband, and he saved from Brian Gill. It was a really strong save from Gillespie, and great scenes, as you mentioned there, with Dan Burn running onto the pitch to hug his Bezzy Mara. Now, the starting 11, Lee, was quite a strong starting 11, and I guess for the likes of Joe Linton and Nick Pope, probably very important to be able to get those minutes into the tank.
Yeah, I think that was always the plan for them to name a starting lineup. I don't think you could have really, the enormity of this game, and having been in Melbourne for not even two full days, the enormity of this game, you could feel it around the city. I was in the city last night. Everyone was talking about it. Obviously, it's a massive cricket country. They've got Aussie rules here as well. They love the rugby, but they were really determined to see a big game of football. And remember, this game was played in front of a bigger crowd than any Premier League game this season. So I think Eddie Howe had to respect that. He named a strong team. I think they did okay in the first sort of hour. And then obviously the inevitable substitutions, like we see in a pre-season friendly, really. But, these are all valuable minutes that some of these youngsters have got. And for some of these players, they're going to actually be leaving the club. So this was a nice send-off for them. And I think, again, you'll see a lot more of that on Friday evening at the Marvel Stadium.
Yeah, another game to come for Newcastle United. I mean, Nick Pope, he had a bit of a mixed afternoon. He was at fault for the goal from Brennan Johnson. A definite handball from James Madison, who eventually put the ball into the back of the net. But Pope passed it to Johnson and it fell to Madison to put away. But then he did save, he saved from Brennan Johnson, didn't he? It was a great save from Johnson. So yeah, a bit of a mixed afternoon, a mistake, but a really crucial save as well.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Pope, in any game he plays, he usually comes up with some, stops from point blank range. And that's what he did tonight. Okay, the back pass to Madison was unfortunate. But as you say, it was a handball anyway. It wouldn't have counted in the Premier League. I don't think anyone's going to hold that against Nick Pope. He's going to be a key player moving forward. And it's good to see him back fit and just playing football again.
Just on Pope, plenty of reports, Lee, that Newcastle are looking at bringing in another goalkeeper. You've had Aaron Ramsdale linked last week. You've had the Valencia shot stopper linked in the last couple of days. What do you think the future holds for Nick Pope? Do you think Newcastle are looking to bring in another goalkeeper this summer to potentially rival him for the number one spot?
I think long term they've always been looking at the goalkeeping position because they know that Martin Dubravka's he's not going to go on forever. And they need to freshen things up. And, Nick Pope that's his place to lose. If that's the question, it's his place to lose. And I think he'll do very well next season when he's fully fit. And, if someone is to come in, if it is going to be Aaron Ramsdale, he doesn't seem so sure about that at the minute. But I don't think he was denying the interest. I think he was just denying that there was a done deal. I think, to be honest, if you got the opportunity to work with Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall again, you would take it.
Yeah, Nick Pope going to be absolutely key for Newcastle, as Lee says. I think we definitely saw how much Newcastle missed him when he got injured earlier in the season. Kieran Trippier, Lee, came off about 38 minutes or so into the game. What happened there? I mean, is he all right?
Yeah, and this is the importance of actually being here because you need to check these things, with the manager. We did exactly that. Kieran Trippier is fine. There's a story on Chronicle Live now. He did have an ice pack around his ankle, I think, when he came off. But ultimately, he's fine. He walked back on the team bus, absolutely fine. Good spirits, no problems there. And I think they've just got to be very, very careful with him.
Yeah, especially as he's just come back from injury. He won't want to be picking anything up and risking his place in England's Euro squad for next month. Isak got the goal for Newcastle, Lee, carrying off where we saw him finish the season. And then there's another assist for Jacob Murphy as well. And I just want to concentrate on Jacob Murphy because listeners of the podcast know I'm a big fan of him. But I think it's just another moment to maybe silence the doubters because there are a few about Jacob Murphy, but I know it's a nothing game, but another assist to his name. He's got a big part to play, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely huge. And I think there's been a couple of games where I've given tens this season. Crystal Palace when they won 4-0 and Burnley away when they won 4-1. He was at the centre of everything for Newcastle in those two games. He can score goals. He can create goals. He's a hard worker. He loves the club. He's a Newcastle fan as well. So for him to be involved at this level, he's the ultimate pro to have around.
I mean, another goal, as we said there, for Alexander Isak. I mean, we've done a full podcast on how good he is, but given how he's finished the season, just how much better can he get?
Yeah, well, that's the scary thing, isn't it? Because he's just going from strength to strength. Every game he looks like he's going to score. Friendly Premier League game, cup game, games against Sunderland. He's gonna get you goals. The fans love him. They're chanting his name all the time. £63 million, when you look at his goal ratio, now looks like probably a bit of a bargain. So you've got to be absolutely delighted with that. And, he knows, I mean, look at that for a stage behind me. It's the MCG. It's one of the biggest sporting arenas in the world. We just walked down the corridor before. There's pictures of all the top performers, all the sports teams who've appeared here. And Isak wanted to add this one to his list, and he's certainly done that.
Do you think Newcastle will be looking to maybe get a new deal sorted out sooner rather than later, just to try and scare off any potential suitors for him?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is with the current ownership, they don't get into contract wrangles with people. Obviously, there was the Joe Linton situation, which rumbled on a little bit longer than they wanted. But ultimately, they want good players to stay here, and that's exactly what Newcastle have done in the recent history. If someone does well, they get a new deal, and Isak will certainly be on that list. And I think something will be sorted sooner rather than later.
Yeah, he has made it clear he doesn't want to lose his best players, and we've saw with Joe Linton, as Lee mentioned, I think that was probably the first big test really for the owners to make sure that these top players get the new deal. They're persuaded to stay, and Joe Linton did, and I think that will also carry weight when we look at the likes of Isak and any potential new deal. We mentioned there they finished the game with a team of youngsters. Good experience, the likes of Ben Parkinson, Travis Hearns, Kieran Thompson, Dylan Charlton making their first team debuts as well. So really, really important moment for those players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're going to need some of those players next season. If Newcastle do get in the Europa Conference League, they're going to rely on some of the younger lads, and they've had a taste of it tonight. Stepping up and taking a penalty, not easy. And I think really, for the majority of the players, the ones who are going to stay, then they're going to have a future. Some will go on loan. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've seen Garang Kuol come on tonight to a standing ovation, took a penalty, stepped up in front of 80,000 people and tucked it away. And now for these players, we'll wait and see what happens. I know some of them will be going on loan, but ultimately some of them will have to stay around. And like Lewis Miley's proved, if you impress this manager, he's going to give you an opportunity.
Certainly is. And you mentioned there Garang Kuol coming off the bench. Nice reception. He's back home in Australia. Now, the last 2 years hasn't quite gone to plan with the loan deals. Why do you think he's been included in this squad, Lee? Is it to give him a chance to go home, get that reception, and then he'll be sent out on loan? Or do you think he might have a real chance of being part of the first team squad next season?
I think, personally, I can see him going on loan again. But hopefully this time he has a bit of better luck. I mean, the Hearts move didn't work for him, unfortunately. The trip to Volendam in Holland hasn't worked out either, because there was a change of coach, a change of system, and he was caught right in the middle of it. So it's going to have to be, they need to get him a good move this time, because he needs those minutes. And, as Minter's proved with Feyenoord, if you get the club right, then the player gets that stage and that opportunity, and then they can go from strength to strength. So Elliot Anderson's another great example. Went to Bristol Rovers, if you remember, and then burst onto the scene with Newcastle. So it's about getting these low moves right, but thankfully Newcastle have got people in positions to do exactly that now.
Yeah, we'll want to watch this summer to see what happens with QL, but lovely to see him get that reception. 1-1 at full time. It looked like penalty shootout Lee came as a bit of a shock to Ange Postecoglou, who seemed to want to head down the tunnel. I don't think he was quite aware that penalties was going to happen. And what did you make of it when you learned that it was going to be a penalty shootout?
Yeah, well, we only really discovered that as the game was sort of starting, and it was always on the list because I've seen a schedule list right down next to the dressing room of what could happen. And when the announcement around the stadium, I think people were surprised, and obviously it surprised the Spurs boss as well. So for that to happen in this game, I did sort of wonder what was going on to a degree, because why would you need it? But remember, the Australian public have come to see a proper game, and they've certainly got it with Newcastle emerging victorious on penalties. It won't do Newcastle any harm after losing the penalty shootout in the domestic season. So it's just something to take forward.
Yeah. Every penalty shot you win is going to be something important to take forward, most certainly. Yeah. I mean, Eddie Howe, Kieran Trippier, Andrew Postecoglou, but to name a few, have all made clear their feelings, Lee, about this trip. They'd rather not be on it from a footballing point of view because they've had a very long season. Do you think that maybe had an impact on maybe the game not being at a real high level? I know you said that it wasn't exactly like a preseason friendly. There was a bit of bite to it, but it's hard, isn't it, to really push the players when you've got both managers coming out and saying I'd rather not be there. You've got the captain coming out and saying it's not really for me, but I understand we have to go. When you hear those comments, do you think it did impact what we saw there this afternoon?
I think that the players that all were selected and have come on this trip they've gave their all, they've gave everything, and I think we saw that from Newcastle. Nobody didn't take it seriously. The players had special sort of programs throughout the journey. They had obviously the sports scientist team with them on the flight, checking who's managed to get certain levels of sleep. So it was all done meticulously behind the scenes. And I think now this game on Friday, I think, will be a much younger Newcastle team. We'll have to wait and see. Some players might not be involved, but ultimately, the public who come here will see this game got what it said on the ticket, a high octane match. I know it may not have looked completely like a Premier League game to some, but I think both sets of players gave everything they had. Everything that was in the tank, they gave it.
And I guess from a non-footballing point of view, at least on the pitch, when you see a 80,000 strong crowd and you see the scenes beforehand at the fan parks, it kind of probably does show to the likes of Darren Eales and Peter Silverstone that there is a market there to be tapped up.
Yeah, and I think one of the videos that I sent you through actually showed the length of the queue for the merchandise store. I was totally surprised by that. I've been on Newcastle pre-season tours before, and they're struggling to ship things, but that was something in itself to see how many people wanted to get merchandise. And look, when Adidas are back on the table, then that's going to be something else. And it wasn't. It was just official T-shirts and stuff from the club that was on sale here, and hoodies and stuff like that. But I think ultimately Newcastle now have big partners in Adidas, and they'll be desperate to make sure that next time on pre-season that those merchandise trucks are there. And yeah, I think that they'll do very well with it.
And have the majority of people that you've seen and interacted with, have they been people who are based in Australia rather than travelling fans from the UK?
No, I do know there is some fans who travelled over here for this game from Tyneside. I know that a couple of them were on my flight as well. So yes, people have come from the UK, but I've spoken to people from everywhere in Australia, from Alice Springs to Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth. They've come from all corners of Australia, and I'm honestly blown away by their kindness and the friendliness of these fans who just want to see the team, and they're as fanatical as we are back home in terms of they want every little bit of information. And just to hear that so many people appreciate what we do, that's a big thing.
Certainly is. And I guess it also just reaffirms why Peter Silverstone and Darren Eales are concentrating on growing the revenue and doing this and taking the players out so quickly after the end of the season to Australia, because growing that revenue is absolutely key to Newcastle's success, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's it could be it could be worth signing a player or not signing a player at the end of the day. And I think Newcastle, for years we knew. I think Newcastle came to New Zealand 10 years ago, and I was lucky enough to be on that trip. And it was an opportunity for Newcastle then to kick on from a global point of view, and they didn't really do it. Obviously, last summer they were in America. They've done this trip to Australia. They're going to Japan. They're now building a bit of momentum on the global market, and it's going to be hard to catch up with Man United and Liverpool because they're the world leaders in terms of fan support. But, Man City are at the table now as well. So you're going in with Man City, Chelsea, Tottenham. If you're a big club, you've got to do these tours and you've got to find a way of getting around it.
Yeah, and it's a great start, I think, with as you say, this trip to America, now the trip to Melbourne. Just a couple more questions before I let you get off, Lee, because I know it's 11:45 over there in Melbourne. You'll be ready for.
Doesn't feel like it.
We away from what happened tonight, transfer-wise, Tosin Adarabioyo from Fulham and Lloyd Kelly are the two names that are consistently being pushed, and it looks likely that at least one of them hopefully will be a Newcastle United player. What's your understanding, and how important is it for Newcastle to get a head start in the transfer market?
Yeah, I think negotiations are ongoing. I don't think there's been any denial about the two players that you've mentioned there. But I think there'll be more to come on top of that as well. There might even be one that throws everybody this summer. And I think I don't want to give too much away because obviously we've had a chance to speak to the manager. But, we never know what's going to happen in the window. And I think the new owners have really given people a few surprises. We'll have to wait and see what happens this summer. But I just think it's going to be an exciting one.
And just finally, drama never far away from Newcastle United. And, of course, Dan Ashworth on gardening leave. And while you've been in Australia, you've been keeping tabs with the story that has been breaking over the last 24 hours about emails sent by mistake and what have you. But a bit of a blunder, let's say, by Dan Ashworth. And it looks like his arbitration is going to be based around the fact that he's going to claim he was sacked by Newcastle. Newcastle obviously putting him on gardening leave. It's all a bit of a mess, isn't it? How do you think this one's going to play out?
Well, what I can say confidently is it won't derail the direction Newcastle are going in. I don't think Eddie Howe is overawed by it. He was the first one to come out and say that the situation couldn't go on any longer. I asked him directly a couple of months ago, do you feel comfortable that, your sporting director who's been linked with Manchester United is privy to such sensitive information? He said that's not right. And a couple of days later, he was on gardening leave. So I think it's a situation that, would be better if it was resolved quicker. But if it's not, then it's got to go through the process that it's got to go through. So it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, one and another one to keep an eye on. Well, Lee, I'll let you get off because I know you'll be gasping for a pint or your bed maybe. But thank you very much for popping on to the podcast. Head over to our YouTube channel, guys, for more content from Lee over in Melbourne. Another game, as he said, on Friday. And you can catch up with everything Eddie Howe had to say in his post-match press conference. And for myself, I'll see you guys very soon.